So we are back to another episode of the Juicy Brush podcast. And we have a special guest today.
Hello.
Andre.
What's up?
Lang. Huynh.
Win.
Yeah. It's the NG, I think, that's hard
There's
to
no
pronounce.
NG.
There is no NG.
No NG?
Okay. We got it. We cleared it up.
So what's another name people might know you by online?
Mechnuggets is the name I go by.
Okay. And that's how they find you on ArtStation and
everywhere,
Instagram.
Twitter, whatever you want.
Nice.
Awesome.
So I guess let's hop right into it. So I'm sure a lot of people probably know who you are, but let's say for the people that don't, who is Mechnuggets and what kind of stuff do you do? What kind of stuff do you like to do?
Well, I'm a concept artist. I work in video games, and I specialize doing mechs and props, vehicles, mostly mech stuff. That's my favorite stuff to do. I do like doing monsters and more fantasy, but like if I have to choose one thing to do for the rest of my life, it's mechs for sure.
Amazing.
Okay,
What kind of projects have you been on? Like what's your work history like?
I worked on Gotham Knights at Warner Brothers. I still work at Warner Brothers.
We kind of crossed paths for a brief moment, I think, right?
Yeah, very shortly.
Yeah.
I worked on Injustice too at Warner Brothers, and I've started my own project called ANIMO, and it was just like a personal fun project.
Like this guy over here?
Yeah, this little guy over there.
Yeah. Hold on, we'll show it the camera. So we got
You
this
can also
little...
put some images of it too as well so people can see it on YouTube.
But just for everyone, here's this little sculpt that you did. So you've done quite a few of these, right?
Yeah, I sculpted this and then printed it with my resin printer. They're super fun to do. I wish I had more time to print more stuff. But
Amazing.
That's really awesome. And one of the big topics we're going to be covering today, just to kind of, I guess, let everybody know, we're going to be talking about VR, and that's a really big part of your process, and that's something that's helped kind of evolve your workflow and how you kind of approach design.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it really skyrocketed my ability to express myself and like to create stuff, because even before I was using VR, I was drawing everything. After that, I got into more 3D stuff, but as soon as I touched VR, it just blew my mind, and it like expanded the capabilities of what I was able to do.
Yeah. And just for anyone who's tuning in who doesn't know what VR is, just for a basic explanation, what would you describe it to them?
Well, VR, virtual reality, is the headset you put on, and then especially for concept art is sculpting. So it's like you're sculpting clay, but it's in front of you, and it like appears, and you interact with it with controllers, but basically it feels like your hands, and it feels like you're sculpting traditionally, but with the perks of modern 3D stuff. It's like if you're drawing on an iPad and you can undo. Well, same thing with this. You can sculpt, but you can zoom in, you can undo, you can modify stuff, and it feels very natural and super powerful.
Amazing. So how did you find VR? Like what was your, I guess, before and after sort of story?
It was kind of random. I was at work someday, and I just thought, hey, VR's a thing. After work, I'm just going to go to Best Buy and then pick up a headset just to try for fun. And that same night, I put it on. I started sculpting. I was like, this is incredible, and I never put it down.
Okay.
Like whenever I first started using it, I would be so like enticed to use it that I would spend 8 hours nonstop just in VR, no breaks, everything, and then I would get crazy motion sickness because you need to take breaks every so often.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, but yeah, it was very random. I think I saw a YouTube video of somebody using it, but it just like on a whim. Oh, let's go.
Just something, I guess, something you saw that could be a cool evolution to your workflow, or Nice.
I'd love to know a little bit, like, so you went from more traditional software as you were using 3D code, and I'm guessing maybe some other softwares as well.
Yeah, like Moi 3D.
Okay. Which is CAD.
Yeah, CAD basically. Other stuff like Max, Maya, Blender, but 3D Code was my main one. Moi 3D and 3D Code were my main ones.
Yeah.
Okay. And doing that transition from like a more traditional software that I would say the majority of concept artists are currently like familiar with at the moment. And going to VR, that's a pretty big change, not only from a tool perspective, but also just like the way you're perceiving your model and everything. Because you're like in a more kind of 3D space, you're changing what's in your hand and you're changing what you're visually seeing. What are kind of like the big pros, like when you kind of started really kind of getting experience with this? Like, what were you like, okay, this is just making this and this like just so much faster? And what areas would you say like you feel are lacking at the moment? You're like, I wish I had these tools that you kind of get from the traditional kind of 3D workflow. Where do you kind of think VR sits at the moment?
Right now, it sits in a pretty basic version. Like, you don't have crazy tools like in ZBrush that allows you to make very specific operations. But the basics are so strong that you're able to sketch like you would with a pen or pencil, but in 3D. So whenever I see somebody try VR for the first time, they will sketch something and it's going to be very flat. Like, they're going to model something like if it was on a screen, right? And then as soon as you turn it this way, you're like, it's very flat. Like, it's a... But the more you start to use VR, the more you realize you're able to design all these angles at the same time, and it's very fluid, and you have a different perspective on how you see objects. Like, just for the size, for example, you sculpt like a gun in VR. You're able to hold it in your hands. You're able to like aim down the sight, stuff like that, and then see if the proportions are right for holding it. If your finger's too big, if your the distance between the stock and your shoulder is good. If you're designing a car and an interior, you can sit in the car and then design stuff around you. Like, it's very powerful to be able to visualize the size of things.
Yeah, because it's much different. Let's say, because you think you came from 3D Coat, right?
Yeah.
Where, correct me if I'm wrong, you're kind of in a program and you're looking at a flat screen.
Yes.
And so it doesn't have the same spatial kind of first person view like you would hold a sculpture in your hand in real life. So yeah, did you find that change really empowering?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it like for you making that switch?
It felt so natural. Like, I like playing with figurines and toys and stuff like that, and it felt exactly the same. Like, if you were to pose a character in traditional 3D software, every time you do an operation, you have to tilt your camera, right?
Okay.
So you turn it this way and then you bend the leg, and then you turn it this way and you bend the leg to get the like different size, different angle. But in VR, you can just take a thing and place it exactly where you want to place it. Like, it feels very natural to be able to place stuff exactly where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and I imagine, let's say you're in 3D Code or another program, it's probably a little clunky now that you're used to VR to, let's say, go on the X axis, go like this way, then Y axis, and then you're kind of fiddling around with it. But maybe in VR, it's really just about, okay, I'm going to take my hand, I'm just going to be like, it's here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, like, whenever I go back to more traditional 3D stuff like Blender, I feel frustrated that I can't just take the thing and put it there. Like, it feels like you're a robot and then you can only turn in one direction at a time, right? And do one thing at a time. But like in VR, you can do the same thing with the controllers. Not in VR. I've seen some people use those controllers on a screen, and it could work too, like a PSVR with Dreams and stuff like that. But be able to move in 3D and like design around stuff and be moving in 3 dimensions, it just feels natural.
That's awesome. Do you get comments at work? Because when you're at work, you have to literally wear a headset. Is it weird to be that guy?
Yeah. I mean, at first, whenever I brought this to the office, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try something. Everybody would be like, who's this fucking guy? What is he doing in the corner, waving his arms around?
He's just like standing up, looking around and stuff like that.
And then everybody would stop behind me and just watch me look, and like, you would hear them breathing right next to your face, or like they're trying to fuck with you and be like, oh man, you see me or whatever. But I got lucky because I was in the corner of the office, so I was pretty isolated.
You're safe.
Yeah. And I guess pretty fast people were like, okay, he's just doing his own thing, and
he's a professional. He's not just this guy playing I don't know, Half-Life or something like that.
But even for the promo for the WB website, they got a filming crew to come in the office, and then they're like, "Oh, can we film you doing VR stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, okay." And I was doing my thing, and they're like, "Can you stand up?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not standing up and dancing like
I
a
need
clown."
a bonus for this.
Like, this is not how it works. I just sit back and
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
That's actually really cool.
Super cool.
And so, okay, so bringing VR into the workplace.
Yep.
So we kind of, I guess, all know that like a workplace, I guess like pipeline is not always the same as a personal pipeline. There's differences. There's other people involved, 3D artists, other department. How does VR fit with that? Are there kind of places in VR that kind of sit extremely well in a studio place that like helps that process between different departments, or do you find it could potentially slow down other areas? Like, where do you think that VR kind of sits in there?
I think it speeds up stuff for sure. Like, as the same thing that applies to 3D concept art, the VR is just another aspect of 3D, right? You can give your 3D models to a modeler or 3D artist that can, clean it up and make like a game asset. You don't have to match views for perspective drawings. You can just work in 3D and then figure stuff out for like animation. You can see very fast if stuff is going to be clipping. And yeah, it's super powerful. Like, I'm very bummed out that people are not using it more.
That's a good point. Noticing that there's maybe like, it doesn't make sense to you that other people aren't using it. What do you think are the main reasons that people might be discouraged about VR?
I mean, you tell me, Sean. I've been trying to introduce you to VR, and then what are your reasons? Because I have all the reasons in the world to like be, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. But like, why are you not using it?
Okay, I like that. Well, for
Checkmate.
me, I'll be honest. Like, I was never much of a technical person, so I gravitated more towards painting. I do like traditional mediums. I like to kind of keep it very simple. For me, jumping into 3D programs felt difficult. So VR was just another very difficult thing. And I know some people are very experimental. I still feel like I've tried to hone one thing only. So that would be more my take. I'm just a little hesitant with like a lot of technical workflows.
And for the 3D aspect of stuff, I think the VR sculpting is the easiest way to get into 3D because it feels so natural. It feels like you're just moving stuff around. You don't have to be bogged down by the vertex of stuff or like the UVs and then making everything clean. And there's like 3 tools you use basically. And there's a clay. There's the
I'm sort of getting sold right now.
You should. You definitely should. I try to evangelize everybody to try VR because it just changed 100% how I think and how I design and how I work. So.
Do you have a VR headset?
No, I borrowed one. I tried it out for a bit. It's just like everything else in my life. Like, I have a tendency to try a lot of things, and if it's not clicking right away, I get frustrated easily.
Okay,
and so it's more of my own limitation sort of thing.
But how long did it take you to learn how to draw?
I mean, I was drawing since I was a kid. So.
Exactly. Like, it took you years to get good at this.
Yeah,
I think if you try to learn ZBrush, it'll take you a month maybe to be proficient in ZBrush.
Yeah.
If you try to pick up like VR sculpting, I think in a week you'll be able to make whatever you want.
Okay, I'm going to take you up on that offer then.
I'll lend you a headset.
Oh my goodness.
So I actually have 2 questions. One, I want to go back to a little point you said before, and I guess the second question afterwards, we could talk about a little bit the different headsets that exist, a little bit about that. But first, you kind of mentioned giving the 3D to the 3D artists.
Yep.
And it's a little bit of a tangent off of VR, but we're both really into hard surface and sci-fi and stuff like that. And that's becoming a norm in the industry. I don't think we see it as much for like characters yet, where character artists are really sculpting and giving their 3D, but hard surface has evolved to a point where it's like, if hard surface designer, guns, mech, anybody doing that kind of stuff is not using 3D, it's almost like abnormal because it's almost expected that you're now giving 3D working off of those
because
workflows.
It's so tough to match all of the drawings to the 3D for a concept that's just a flat image, and especially with like drawing perspective is hard, man. Like you want to use the tools that make it easier to make the best job possible, and 3D is just that for props
Yeah.
and anything hard surface for sure.
So do you think that maybe VR could open up that, because like you wouldn't use like a CAD software or something like that for characters and environment, but do you think that potentially VR from a speed perspective can open up that window to other parts like
100%.
character artists, maybe some aspects of environment art?
For a character, it's great because you're able to sketch or draw like a dynamic pose, but in 3D. Like what is bothering most people with 3D is it's very stiff, it's very rigid, and it feels cold. But when you sculpt in VR, you're able to be very dynamic with your strokes and your brush and your things you are creating. It feels very fluid, so you're able to do dynamic poses for characters or like have very gestural 3D, which isn't a thing in other software to be gestural.
Because right now, I think your options are, if you were to go the 3D route for characters, you have ZBrush, which I would say is the opposite of VR. It's extremely unintuitive. Like you said, it takes about like a month to just learn because the shortcuts UI, it's just different than all the other stuff. Yeah, and then VR is the opposite because it's super simplistic. It's like there's a lot less tools. It's very the foundation, like the basics you said is it works really well. And your other option after that is to use the multi software where you have DAZ, you have Marmoset, or whatever the thing for like the cloth, and like people use 5 different softwares, and it's like ZBrush maybe has less of a pain point, but that other one, it's like the people who know it, amazing results that they get, but it's such a pain point to get into because you need to learn all these different software just to make one thing. ZBrush, it's just one package, but it's very hard to get into. It's not the easiest. So yeah, VR, I could see that being like a really, it's easy to get into. It's more intuitive. You can learn it fast, like you said, in about a week, and you don't need to learn a million softwares for it. So you can really kind of get in there, start sketching, and yeah, that could definitely be a tool I could see.
You're more comfortable with designing stuff on the fly. Like before, I used to sketch stuff and then I would model what I sketched. Right now with the workflow in VR, I can sketch directly in 3D, so I can have my ideas as fast as I can from my head to the whatever I'm creating.
And what do you think about, so this will be a little backwards. So you're using it for sketching. Do you think there's a place for VR where you don't use it for your final 3D, but you use it just for sketching, and then you can go into like if you need something precise like CAD or something?
Like or even ZBrush, like if you want something clean with like a lot of texture and like, you know, pores on the face or scales on whatever, you definitely can use it as just a base to sculpt something gestural and then polish it in whatever 3D software you want.
Okay, that's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah, so it is quite flexible.
It's super flexible. I personally try to use it as much as I can, like only in VR, because using different programs to like, it slows me down and brings my energy down. And at the end of the day, like I don't feel like I have my best work if I need to switch back and forth between programs.
Yeah.
And also try to push the medium as far as I can, like to get to the next big thing that can happen.
Building off of that, what do you think, what's the certain quality benchmark that VR can achieve usually? Like I know certain programs have their strengths and weaknesses. Like for VR, in terms of what you usually expect, what can people usually expect from those programs?
It's going to be less detailed than something in ZBrush, for example. It's maybe less polished, and the topology of stuff is going to be messier for sure than anything that's sub-D modeled or like retopologized by hand. But that's not the strength of VR, and that's not why I use it. I use it to concept, and I use it to make ideas. I don't use it to make the cleanest thing I can. That's not what we're paid for either. Like as a concept artist, you need to be having a ton of ideas and like interesting designs. It's not about making it clean. Like you could design let's say a character and the face is rendered perfectly, but the costume is just a terrible idea. That's not going to get picked.
Yeah. You need to make ideas fast. You need to have a certain output.
It's not about being clean. It's about having good designs, and that gets me good designs fast.
Amazing. Yeah. That's
cool. Really awesome.
I have a question because it's one of the things that's always on my mind. Is there any hardships with the what's it called?
headset.
The headset being such a you have to wear it basically. It's always on your face.
Yes, I mean, at first, I used to have it on my face so long and not taking breaks, and it's not a good thing. You need to take breaks. I'd say every hour or so. Just take it off, look around, drink water, and then go back. But if you put it for like way too long, you can get like I had marks on my face. Like,
Okay.
my skin would be fucked up from the headset. So what I've been using is a face mask, and it's just like a tiny piece of cloth that's like cut, like a disposable face mask that I use in between my headset and my face.
Interesting. Yeah. Has the headsets gotten better over time too? Have you noticed less strain or less eye strain over time?
Yeah, the resolution's better, the frame rate's better, they're lighter. Whenever I first started, I had to have cameras on my desk looking at the headset for like the tracking. And now the tracking is in the headset itself.
Wow.
So you don't have to set up cameras on your desk, and there's less wires. They are getting better and better for sure.
Nice. They used to have like full rooms, like some people would set them up in like corners and stuff like that. It was really intense. So speaking about headsets, I think that's a good point because I wanted to ask about, so what are the headset options? Because I've done a little bit of research myself, and because I know like Oculus is a big brand. I've heard rumors when I've been reading that there was the new PSVR that looked really good and they were going to allow PC support. And then there's a lot of other brand like I think HTC Vive and the Valve one. I think which that is the Valve one. I'm not sure.
The Valve Index.
Oh, the Index. Okay. Yeah. So what are the options? Like realistically, if somebody wants to get in this specifically for concept art, let's say maybe gaming is not much of a focus. They just want to get in for concept art and use it. Like, where do they start? Like, what are their options? Like, how do they kind of get into that?
The short answer is the Oculus one for concept and then the Valve one for gaming.
Okay.
If you want to get more specific, I've used most, if not all of the Oculus one. Right now I'm using a Quest 3. But they're all pretty good. And even if you can get a cheaper one, like an older Quest 2, it still works very well.
Yeah. That's what I currently have, a Quest 2.
Yeah, it works just fine. I've used one for years and it was great.
Nice.
Yeah. But the Oculus one are the ones that are most compatible with the softwares. And if you want, you can get into that. But I'm using Substance Modeler. And before that, I was using Adobe Medium. And basically, the Medium team got bought by Adobe, and then it's rebranded as a Substance Modeler. But it's the exact same team that was developing the previous software that's developing Modeler.
So you're saying there's more than one software for modeling?
The one I'm using, it's voxel based. So it's like basically 3D pixels.
What's up?
Nothing. Sorry.
You just looked at me weird.
I thought, wait, did you hear that?
No.
Okay, never mind. Let's just keep going.
Carry on, sir.
We're gonna cut that. We're gonna cut that piece out. Sorry about that.
No, we're keeping it.
Don't keep it.
Yeah. You just looked at me like something like a rat ran across the room or something.
Pause 2 seconds. My stomach made a weird sound.
Oh,
and then you looked at me.
No,
I looked at you and I went like this. I'm like, I'm sorry.
You looked at me, dude. You looked at me. I didn't hear anything. Okay. Well, the washroom's over there in case you need to.
I'm fine. It's just my stomach did a weird growling, and I thought you heard it. I'm
gonna go into the sound and like raise the volume
raise
for
the
that
gain.
part so everyone hears it.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it. You're the only one that heard it.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I'll remember that next time.
Well, on that note, what were we talking about? Voxels.
Voxels.
The different programs. Yeah.
So you can use a voxel-based software like Substance Modeler, or there's also more traditional looking software, traditional workflow like poly modeling with Gravity Sketch and stuff like that. And some programs are closer to ZBrush with like surface sculpting, where you have a mesh with like polygons on the surface, and then you can carve away and then sculpt.
Wow, okay.
Like ZBrush. But my favorite one is very close to 3D Code, and it's voxel based, and that's what felt the most natural as a transition between traditional 3D and then VR.
Okay. What are the pros and cons of all the three, you think? Maybe we're overlapping with something said, but like, what do you think would be like the strengths of each of those programs for people who want to know?
So the voxel is very natural and it feels like you're just creating stuff, right? You don't have to be bothered too much about the topology of stuff.
So for messy people who are just like, I just want
to make something cool.
Yeah.
For designs like cars or something that has a very smooth transition and like curves that are very precise, Gravity Sketch is great because it feels like you're placing a curve and then you can edit that curve and then tweak those points. So that's very good for like car design, shoe design. It feels very...
Shoe design?
Yeah, like a shoe designer.
Oh, okay, cool. I wasn't expecting that.
Like what's it called? Industrial design.
Like
they mimic the way industrial design work with like the sketching and then the rendering, but for VR.
Isn't VR a little bit more popular in the industrial design field? I know they use it for car presentations, looking at models and stuff like that.
It would make sense because it's the evolution of the tool. You know, car designers, they used to like sculpt stuff with the tape.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing, but now you can edit the tape in 3D and then you can just 3D print whatever you just made, right?
Yeah.
So instead of having to carve stuff by hand, like it's the evolution of that, and it feels very intuitive to take. And then for the surface stuff, it works fine. There's not a one program that's very good. Like ZBrush is still better at that type of stuff.
Okay. Interesting.
So I guess the moral of all this is stop whatever 3D software you're using and jump into VR.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Get
with the
jump into VR.
It's that simple, guys.
Embrace the future and then
join us.
So I guess realistically, let's say somebody's starting out, right? So it's one thing to jump into 3D when you have experience. We've been working for a bit. We're kind of at this point where we're trying to refine and we're trying to try new softwares and develop our workflow. But let's say somebody's starting out. They're still at a point where they're learning the fundamentals. They're like, well, VR is super cool. It's really interesting. But there's always that point where it's like before you jump into 3D, you have to make sure your fundamentals are good and like you have some design skills. Like where do you think VR for somebody that really wants that as a part of their workflow, where does that kind of fit in the learning process? When do you think is like, when should you jump in to kind of...
I think right away, man. Like if you really want to, you can apply all of those fundamentals that you learned for 2D and you can just straight up translate them into 3D. Like the anatomy is going to be the same thing. There's some stuff that's going to get easier, like perspective is going to be way easier. Rendering is going to be easier because you don't have to render everything by hand. But if you're really good at rendering, you can take anything that you modeled in VR and just paint over and like fix all the stuff that are hard to model or that you don't know exactly how to make. You can just paint on top, right? Like it's complementary to whatever skills you have already. So if you're really good at like gun design because you know all the parts, it's pretty easy to translate that with VR to just make it.
Interesting.
That's awesome. So yeah, so if you're interested, I guess, in getting into VR, there's pretty much no good time. Like you just, whenever you're interested, you just get into it and kind of like be an extension of that.
You realize pretty fast that you don't know a lot of things because you're able to model anything you want. And then you're like, what do I want? I don't know.
Yeah, it forces you to probably answer way more questions because it's literally right in front of you and you're constantly have to look around it. Maybe it's not the case in other 3D programs. Like you can kind of, you don't really see as much or you don't have that same like lens on it.
Even for drawing, it's like, if I gave you the ability to draw anything you want, as good as you want right now, what do you make? What do you do?
Really adorable faces.
Like,
yeah, I just draw Nick 5 times in a row. I make like a Andy Warhol, blue Nick.
But I had a question.
Sorry. I'm making it, guys. This is gonna be the thumbnail of this video. It's gonna be like VR sculpting, just like a bunch of Nick sculpts, just in like different colors.
I actually forgot my question because I'm sorry. I had one too. Oh, what was I gonna ask? I'm so sorry. I forgot.
We were talking about the endless possibilities because VR is so powerful. You can make anything.
Oh yeah, So I guess I want to talk about looking at your prop from different angles, and that's a big thing for design because you get into design, and it's already a pretty big undertaking to learn design.
Yep.
And you kind of design, a lot of the times the process has always been you design props for a specific view, really solidify that, and then you go into 3D and give it dimension. And designing with all the other axes in mind really changes the game from, like, let's say just the side view or something like that. And over time, with experience, you build that connection. You know what your side view is going to potentially look like in those other axes. But being able to kind of develop those design skills really early on, and you
see it immediately.
Yeah.
Like if you design a gun and the barrel is too big, as soon as you turn it, you're like, this feels wrong. Like it's too big. Like my hand wouldn't fit in this thing. Like having it in your face, like you can't ignore all of those problems.
Yeah.
So if I sculpt Nick, like I'll be like, oh, I know his nose is too small.
Yeah.
Because when I go, like, you know, I can look underneath his nose. You know, I can
Exactly.
I can smell him a little. I can be like, you know,
don't do any of it. But yeah, so it's like it kind of can develop that kind of design skill of seeing it, and that would help when you're designing even in 2D. If you want to ever sketch, like then you'll remember kind of like how shapes look in 3-dimensional.
Yeah, going back and forth, like my 3D got my 2D better, and my 2D got my 3D better.
That's
like,
a huge point.
Yeah.
That makes me think, would you recommend, like, when would you recommend this to people who are learning art fundamentals? Like, would you say, like,
just ask that?
No, but like in the, you know, like, would it be like a later in development sort of thing? Or
I asked that
oh, you did.
I asked that exact question.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Like on that note, like I would love to see somebody that doesn't follow any of the traditional fundamental way of working and just starts day one with VR just to see what's possible. Because to me, it just blew everything that I knew like away. It was like, oh, so you don't need to learn any perspective because you're doing everything in 3D.
That's not good.
What is it?
I believe in learning perspective in 2D.
Yes, but because you're working in 2D.
That's true.
Like,
so I'm the old generation.
So not necessarily that you're old generation, but like all of your life, you learn that composition is like
it's in a frame.
It's in a frame. It's in a 2D flat surface. And then whenever you design in VR or 3D, composition is out the window. But it's not out the window. It still exists, but it's framed differently, right?
I see what you mean.
Because you have to think about stuff in a 3-dimensional way. So composition is still good because at the end of the day, you're going to present something on a screen. People are going to see it on a screen, so it's still flat. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about, let's say, photography and like compositing your shots, looking at your work, and then taking a picture of it, right?
100%.
But whenever
it turns from like I just want to touch on a specific point you said of seeing the composition differently in the frame. It's kind of almost turning into level design because that's something they do in 3-dimensionality, right? They're creating these leading lines to tell the player where to go through a single player game or through multiplayer for like these friction points. And it's like now it's not just composition for like a flat image to just show your
there's purpose behind where you play stuff.
Yeah, so you're almost helping with like a level design aspect and really seeing how does this area flow and how am I leading the player on into this area. It's a very different way of looking at your environment, which is really interesting and almost very useful, actually.
You have to think about the functionality of things a lot more because whenever you work in 2D, you think a lot of how do I make something look good first. Mm-hmm. So with like lighting, perspective, anatomy, all that stuff. They're all skills that are very important for sure, but you spend so much energy trying to make those things good that sometimes design takes a backseat, right? So like you try to render the thing perfectly, you try to make it look clean, but then it ends up like crippling your design because all your energy is not spent onto making something functional and, you know.
I guess it's context dependent because like in a game, I think VR, this is where it shines because when you're walking into, let's say, a sci-fi world, you're not going to just be like, oh, there's the design and you don't change the view. You actually maybe enter the thing or you're approaching it or you hold it. So maybe it's one of those things where we just need to know what context this thing serves. And then you can choose VR as like basically the tool for the job. So because that's the thing, I'm on more of the side of 2D. That's what I love. But if I'm just making, let's say, a book cover or a card illustration, as long as it just looks good in that one shot, that's really where the value is. So,
or movies too. Every shot is designed. Yeah, stuff is moving, but everything is controlled. In video games, you can't control the player. They're gonna do the weirdest thing possible. They're gonna look at the tiny thing on the ceiling or like the weird angle or something. So you can't control where they're looking. So you have to make it look good from every angle.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Not all games achieve that. You'll play some games and it's just like, it'll look good. Like you enter the level and you're like, wow, this looks amazing. And you start moving to, oh, this looks really good. You'll get in some other areas and it's like, stuff is just like blocked and it doesn't look as great. And I think a good, not to go into the game, but like just in general, a game that did this really well was Elden Ring. Like you could walk through the level at any point, you stopped moving, like everything just kind of led you to where you should be going. It looked like you could just screenshot at any point. Very good draw. And another game I can think of that did this really well was some of the Final Fantasy games, especially the newest one, 16. Again, the levels like were designed in a way that like no matter where you looked, like it looked amazing. Everything was kind of leading you correctly. So I find that really changed the experience in a game. Like you're going in there, and even more so in a multiplayer game, if the concept artist can design something that looks good, and with teaming up with the level designers can design something that feels and plays well, especially for stuff like shooters and things like that, you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. Like you're able to make something aesthetically pleasing and extremely functional from a level design perspective that can potentially really kind of like smooth out that transition. Because that's always I found a point of friction, right? Because you have the level needs to work like this, but then we're always like, but it doesn't look as cool unless you did this and that. And so if you can find that middle ground that kind of warps everything together, there's a lot of value there for sure.
One game that did that really well is one of our favorite games, Destiny. They make the whole level look really good, and you play a mission, let's say walking into that direction, and they make you play another mission where you're walking in the opposite direction. So you start from the end of the level and then you walk all the way to the beginning of the level, and it feels like a different place, but you're just walking in the opposite direction. So like the whole environment, wherever you look at, however you interact with it, it just looks beautiful.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, such an unintuitive thing as concept artists entering the industry is it's not just your pictures; it's actually a space. So good thing to really.
Or it's like what do you make? Like what's your voice? What are your specific taste? What are you trying to design? Like if we each get the same task, we're gonna come up with a different solution, a different visual answer to that thing. And then with VR, I think it's the easiest or fastest distance between like what's in your head and then what's manifested.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm definitely going to jump into it more.
I'm getting sold. Like at first I was like, nah, it's not for me. But now I'm like, man, you're really buttering it up.
I mean,
I kind of want to try it again.
To me, it just completely changed how I think about things and how I design and how I approach creating, because I was that kid that was always drawing, like same as you guys. And I had a lot of fun creating stuff. But at some point I realized it was not about drawing or painting. It was about creating something. Like it's about making something cool. Like whatever the tools are, I just want to create something, right? And it's the most like frictionless way of doing it, because you don't have to clean up your paints. You don't have to, you know.
That's a good point. That took a long time for me to get that intent to outcome latency being like almost zero. And I feel like every medium can do that, but it's cool how you have that with VR. I find I have that with paint, but I guess it just depends on like what your training is and how much you've refined your process, because it took a long time for me.
For me, I was very frustrated whenever I was drawing something. I was like, it doesn't come out how I want. Like I see it in my head, but I'm not able to physically do it because my fundamentals are not strong enough, or like I don't know how to draw the anatomy of somebody's face, and I would draw something and be like, this is so ugly. Like, why is it not working? Right.
Yeah.
Like it's a frustrating feeling. And then having that just taken away and be like, oh, now you can do whatever. Just
actually, let's speak more about that. Like having zero latency, really, because that's what I think we all want. as an artist, the one of the most hardest experience is having some sort of intent and it just not becoming that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's this aspect of, there's going to be challenges no matter what you do. There's going to be parts where you're like, this is not really what I intended. But I think that's what we really want. What would be your advice for someone who is struggling getting that intent to result struggle?
You have to understand what you're trying to make. Like you have to understand what's the structure, what's the function, or like how that thing is made. The reason why you're not able to make it properly, apart from the technical aspect of like you're not able to draw it, is you don't understand how the thing is built or how it functions, right? You need to do research. You need to be able to see the world and like, how is this machine working? How is this gun working? Why is it built that way? And once you're able to at least understand part of it and you're able to like fake it enough so that it's believable, that's where like good you're able to represent that stuff. Because like with VR, there's no zero latency. There's still some stuff that is hard to do. It's still a skill that you need to practice. It's not like you're gonna put on the headset and be like, oh, now I can do whatever. Like it's still, you need to practice that skill, but it's like the shortest way of
like really doing the research. I find that's huge. A lot of, when I was starting, I used to think artists were just, gifted in some sense. You just like, oh, I could just design whatever I want. I should eventually, just be like that. But in essence, I'm realizing that all the best artists and all the best designers, they research stuff for hours or sometimes days. And then they start doing the art after. So it's cool that you mention how much understanding plays a part in getting that, that good start in your art process.
At some point, it'll feel natural whenever you learn a lot about stuff. Like for example, for me, like mechs, I did so many of them, and I loved mechs since I was a kid that I understand how it's built because I built so many Gundam kits or like model kits. So I understand how that thing is put together. So whenever I create a mech in VR or even drawing them, like I know what parts does what. Okay. And it feels very intuitive to be able to just translate that. But if I were to draw or sculpt a crocodile, I still need to understand the anatomy of a crocodile and like how it's made, how it's built.
Nice. So workflow wise, I know I keep jumping from point to point, but I want to jump into your workflow again. So let's say you finish sculpting something, you have your mech done. Is there kind of like other softwares now to handle stuff like texturing and materials? Because I know like that's a big process, right? Some people use Keyshot, some people use Blender, some people use Substance texturing. What's that process from VR? How much can you stay for texturing? How much can you stay for rendering? Or is there a point where you have to go back to PC for some of these steps?
If you want just something that you're able to paint on top of it, you can just take a screenshot of your modeler window and then be able to paint on top. What I do is I use mostly Keyshot because it's the fastest way of like lighting stuff and then applying materials. But there's so many different ways. Like I've been experimenting with Substance Painter and then getting really textured props with like rust and decay and stuff like that.
Can you do that in VR yet or no? That's
not yet.
All of that is outside of
it VR. Is outside.
Okay.
You can paint on the surface with like vertex color, so you can assign basic materials, but it's not as developed as, let's say, Painter that is just made for that.
Do you think it's coming? Like, do you think that's...
I hope so. That'd be great. Like, if I could do everything in VR, it'd be so much faster because even when I'm in Painter and I want to paint on top of something, I still have to use my screen and then turn stuff and be like, okay, well, what about this little crevice, like in the back of the armpit, You have to turn and try to match the view so that it works. But
yeah,
if it was in VR, it'd be great too.
Yeah, I have a question too. You seem to be at the forefront of the potentials of VR. To anyone who's listening, what do you want to see in the future of VR?
That's a tough question. Like,
what do we need?
What do we need? What do we need? I mean, definitely tools that are a bit more specific, like stuff in ZBrush where you have different alphas and stuff like that, or be able to control the surface of things, very micro details. The problem right now with voxel is it's the density of the mesh is so low compared to the size of the detail you need to make. So like, let's say,
so more resolution.
Yeah, more resolution or just more power. Like I can sculpt something that's super high resolution, very dense, but then other programs I can't even render it. Like I can't export it to the Blender because the sculpt is so heavy that Blender can't
Blows up.
handle it.
Yeah, it's
So
terrible.
what I would like to be able to do is just take that sculpt that I made and then in like one click just translate it into something with like low poly UVs and all that stuff, or just even not be bogged down by low poly UV stuff. Like just make something and then from VR to like a game, you know, like this. But I don't know how it's gonna happen. It's just right now the retopology of stuff. There's whole jobs that are just that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess translating it into the final product, right? So like, let's say for example, like a 3D sculpt that you print, you still have to do a lot of editing to make it 3D printable. It's not just like, oh, I made a sculpt and now I print it. You have to fill certain like holes. You have to like put supports on stuff. You have to make it sure that it will print the right way, right? But yeah, just being able to translate it from whatever sculpt you have to the game, the movie, that'd be the best.
Yeah, awesome. Well, they've heard now, so maybe they'll do it.
Yeah, I don't know who's they, but good luck.
Do you think actually, before we jump on to the next thing, like, do you think they're gonna? Where do you think the evolution of headsets is heading towards? Do you see something a much lighter, much more form fitting?
Yeah, it's gonna get lighter and lighter. If it was just me, just plug me in like in the Matrix, and
Oh man,
I'd be happy.
you're just willingly
yeah.
make me a cyborg.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't want something on my face. Just plug me in directly and then let me like sculpt like a airbender, you know?
Yeah.
So instead of at work with the giant like mask on, you're gonna be at work with like just wires. Coming
Yeah,
out of your
sure.
head sculpt.
Yeah.
Or just make that wireless. Why you need the wires, bro?
That's true.
go.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's really futuristic stuff. Like wireless human beings. It's amazing.
Then once you're just before you hit overtime, they just come behind you and turn the. You can't use the software anymore. You're done.
But yeah, the headsets are getting lighter, faster. For all the tools I'm using, I still need a good PC. I still need like a pretty decent machine with like a good graphics card and everything. But
that's a good point. Maybe you can talk about what the right PC is for VR.
Yeah, you still need a decently powerful machine. For stuff like Gravity Sketch, it runs on just the headset because it's not handling a ton of geometry. But for anything that's voxel based or like the surface stuff, you need a decent PC. I think the minimum requirement is like a 2080. I have a 3080, but you still need a good $1,000
if you really like
$1,000 PC.
I guess it's just like a matter of how smooth you want it at that point.
Yeah.
So what's the total budget you would say? Like, let's say with the helmet included, what we say is the bare minimum budget. Somebody, maybe a student, wants to get into it. What are they looking at?
You have a PC already?
No, let's say everything. They would need something that work. What would be the total budget? Mind you, that PC you can. That.
Just when you turn your head, just make sure the sound gets.
Let's say the PC is obviously going to be used for your Wacom tablet, all this kind of stuff. But let's just say as a whole, because not everybody has the strongest PC, they'd probably have to upgrade. So, what's the total package, bare minimum budget you could probably get away with?
You can get a headset for like $300 if it's the Quest 2, maybe $600 if it's the Quest 3, and then a PC like the minimum would be maybe $1,500, and then you can push it as far as I can. But like it's normal. Well, normal. It's a decent work PC for anybody that does Blender or play games or whatever. Like
So it really isn't that bad.
You don't need something crazy.
Yeah, it's not. It's pretty accessible actually now.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it could still be a barrier to entry because I do know a lot of student artists rely on laptops. They'll get a laptop that's more budget friendly and stuff. So that is something to kind of think about. I definitely could see that being a barrier entry as opposed to you have like a laptop and you download Blender, right? Blender's free and stuff like that. So I can kind of get it, but I definitely would like to see VR more as like a staple in offices because that's definitely something that is budget. It's not like trying to get Keyshot, which is like the licenses are so expensive as probably the setup of this.
For a license of Keyshot, you can probably get 2 VR setups.
You know? Wow.
It's really rough. Yeah. So it's like it's definitely from like a studio standpoint a lot more budget friendly than some of the softwares being used out there. So that I think is great. It might be a little pricey for some students depending where you're at and what your budget is. So maybe it's not something you get right away, but in general, like, yeah, it's not too bad. And
then you can play games on that PC and everything. So
yeah. So yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so that's a good kind of, or anybody wondering like what would this cost me to kind of get started with this kind of stuff? That's like a rough estimate. Like obviously do your research and get stuff on sale or used and all that kind of stuff, but in general, that's a rough estimate.
Yeah, I use it almost exclusively for concept and for sculpting. I don't play that many games. Like they're cool, but I prefer playing games on like just a normal PC. But for sculpting, it's just, to me, it's mind blowing. Like I don't understand why everybody's not using it.
Yeah. Well, maybe more now. So
yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Honestly, I definitely need to switch. I tried it out. So I did try it a bit myself.
And what was your reason for not like adopting it? Was it price? Was
I don't think I had negative. I actually really liked my experience with it. The first time went like I think most people's first time. You start scribbling and you're like, ooh, I can put my head in this sphere, you know? And you're like, whoa, I can see the inside of everything. And you're just like, you just do nothing with it. And then the second time I was like, okay, I'm going to try to design a gun with this. And at first, I was doing the side view thing like you were talking about. And then I started really turning it. And I was like, wait a minute, I usually use Fusion. I was just like doing these angles at any like angle I wanted to, which you can't really do that in Fusion. Like you can do that in plasticity, but in Fusion it's just like a pain to do these like really weird angled cuts in space. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really see the benefit of this. And I was like, oh, cool. I can test the scaling. The handle's too close. I can look at my reticle. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. I really like this. Do I have a reason? I mean, I think my reasons were, it was kind of like the heftiness of the setup. It was like, because I put the stuff away. It's not like my Wacom tablet that it's plugged in 24/7. My peripherals are plugged in. I take out my headset. I hang up my my controllers because they don't stay on my desk, and so I have to kind of like put in everything.
That's one extra step that like just
everything else is just there. I just pick up the tablet and I start drawing, and it's like I just put it back down and it's everything set up. The headset, it's not so much. I have to kind of like take it off the shelf and kind of plug it in, and then you're waiting for it to load up, and then you're constantly like looking at your screen. If you need to say something, put it back on, looking at the screen. It's like that step to, I find, just power it all on and get it. It's like a little bit longer than just opening up Photoshop.
20 seconds, that just puts it over the edge.
Maybe for you it's 20 seconds. For me, it was like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, because I'm still like getting used to it. But like, it was just like, it felt like an eternity,
I understand.
Right?
It feels like a whole thing.
Yeah, it's not, but it generally does in the moment you're not used to it, and you're like finicking with the mask because you're not comfortable yet, and you're not used to having it. So it's like, I think it was a comfort thing. It's like, but if you really do stick with it, like I'll get used to the headset. I'll find a way to optimize my setup. After a month or two, you're gonna start realizing, oh, if I just set it up like this, it's more efficient. It's just about getting through those pain points, like anything else, learning art, and there's always going to be pain points, and like, you just got to suck it up. And I think at that point, there was a lot of other pain points I was working on in the art field. So I was like, I really do want to learn this, but right now my time is applied to other things I'm learning at the moment. So I want to focus on that. And so after that's done, then VR is going to be the next kind of step that I can kind of jump into and put into my workflow. So it wasn't no, I don't want to do VR. This was really cool. It helps a lot of aspects that I kind of hate about 3D, because I'm actually I don't like 3D, even though it's mostly what I use for my workflow.
You don't like 3D?
I don't.
What?
I use it for so much.
You're like
of my
the
work.
3D. You are the 3D.
I use so much 3D, and I absolutely hate 3D.
So what do you like in life? Do you like stuff?
It's such a weird thing to say. I
Yeah.
actually just like drawing with line work. That's like, I just find it super relaxing, and I find it so much fun. Yeah, using 3D, not something I enjoy to do, even though I would say like a good 80% to 70% of my workflow is 3D. So yeah, but that, I guess that kind of shows you that I love designing so much, and so much more that I'm okay with that. So I think that mixed with, I was learning other stuff and I was trying to work on other aspects of my art skills. I didn't want to jump into 3D right away, but I have the system, I have the setup for things, which is something I do want to tackle, I would say, in 2025. That's one of the things I actually want to jump into and make a part of my workflow, because I need a sculpting software. I can't just have CAD.
Same, actually. It's been tricky trying to get like removing the friction, basically. Finding a software where you're not like, oh, fuck, like, I don't want to do this. It's going to suck. It's going to be, it has like this sort of, you kind of make this wall where it's like, it feels really hard to pass, but if you really think about it, it's just like 20, 30 seconds. But it's, I guess in the future, it's about, I guess, giving yourself the chance to do it a few times so you realize it's actually really easy.
Yeah, but that's what I've heard from most people that try it, and they're like, oh, it was very cool and it was very powerful, but like, I didn't commit to it because there is that friction there. It's like, it's a thing. I have to put my headset on. I have to learn a different software. I prefer to just go back to whatever I liked. And but once you figure it out, once you go over that barrier of like, it's a new thing that I need to learn, it just opens up doors that you wouldn't even think about.
I will say what actually would be nice to have, and maybe I'm like hinting you a little bit from my end, is that compared to other softwares, a bit for Fusion, but like if you jumped into 3D Code, there's so much out there. You have Jama's courses. Like there's a ton of stuff where it's like, you can really just learn how to use it at a professional level, what people are doing. With 3D Code, there isn't a lot of resources out there. So one of the resources, I did look at your stuff. I was like, okay, I was seeing how you were opening up your menus, how you were turning your models, but it was very much of like, I was pausing, slowing it down, really just kind of seeing how you kind of work a little bit. But I wouldn't say there's a lot of tools or videos out there where it's just like, okay, this is how I think about 3D Code. I use these tools the most. This is how I kind of incorporate into my workflow. Just kind of seeing somebody's kind of mental process behind it, which kind of helps, because then when you get into, you're like, okay, let's try like thinking like them for a minute. I'm going to try and adopt that. And then over time it evolves to be your own. And you don't really get that. So you kind of get to explore, which is fun. You're like finicking with all these tools. But at the same time, it can be frustrating because you're like, I really want to do this. And I wish I could just see how somebody else tackled this. Like, what are the tools? I have these questions. I like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, it would be cool to have some videos out there. There's not a lot, I would say, because not a lot of people are doing VR. So I think that could also be a pain point, especially if you haven't even learned a 3D software and this is your first. I could see that being a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah, there's some resources out there. There's not a ton of them. Like, I try to put out content that is fun to watch and also educational, I guess. But I miss watching tutorials, like, because there's not a ton of like, I've watched every single VR tutorial that's out there pretty much. Like, there's some really cool stuff for organic sculpting, but for everything that's mech or like stuff that I like, there's not a ton of it. Like, I have to make it. Like, I would love to find that, you know, JAMA VR like level of
just super precise, a lot of, you know, structure.
Already figured out for you. You know, they give you the answers. Like, right now I have to find the answers for myself, which is nice sometimes, actually. But like,
so maybe you're JAMA.
No,
so you need to create. But you can.
That would be great. But
so maybe you could start off as being the JAMA who has the tutorial, and then you create more people that will then like develop their own.
That's what I'm trying to do, and like try to get more people into VR, and then sharing all of my knowledge on that, so that everybody can learn as a whole and just bring the whole medium, you know, forward. That'd be great.
So where do people go to, like, so where do people go to find you, learn from you? Where's like the place you put like your information for, let's say, people that don't know?
If you just search Mechnuggets, but Mech, MECH, like Mech. I have stuff on YouTube. I have stuff on Instagram. Sometimes I stream on Twitch, and I will upload it to YouTube afterwards. I don't have a ton of time to be like consistently streaming and all that stuff. I would love to share more. I have a tutorial with Gnomon Workshop for Medium. But for but for modeler, I don't have a ton of resources. Like I have a couple streams up right now. I just would love to do more. It just takes a ton of time to be able to make a class and then edit and then figure everything out.
Yeah.
Like awesome. So I prefer to do more casual streams where people can just come up and then I can talk and make stuff a bit more informal. That's the type of content that I like to watch too. Now, whenever it's too serious, like watching a tutorial and it's like, oh, step 1, you click here, do this. Like it just feels boring. I like watching sped up videos a lot. So that's the type of stuff I upload as well.
We watch tutorials very differently.
Yeah.
I'm the person that like click here. I kid you not, when I learned Fusion, it was like I was copying their measurements. They were putting it in the size. I was like, I just want to do it exactly like they do it, and then I'm good to go after.
Wow.
Whenever I watch a tutorial of like a new software or a new technique, whatever, I'll watch it at like 1.5 speed because I can't just sit there and like watch the whole thing like this. I need the information downloaded into my brain as fast as I can.
Amazing.
It's kind of interesting. We all absorb information differently and kind of approach the learning process. Like it's always kind of fun. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I guess we need more 3D VR people, and we need more content creators for VR.
We need to create more
and
VR people.
Sean, now this is your cue. Learn VR and start making tutorials for VR.
I'm ready. I'm a bit more ready than usual. So you might see some.
If I can convert you, like
anything's possible.
Yeah, I can convert anybody.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that'd be great if more people just got into it. Like, it really would push, I think, the industry forward. Like, as
for
a
sure.
whole.
It happened with 3D Co, right? Like you started seeing people pop up with.
But
3D
it happened with 3D in general.
Yeah.
Right. Like people were doing 2D photo bashing, and then whenever 3D came in, it just changed the whole industry.
That's a good point. Actually,
I think VR is that thing, but it needs to be frictionless. Like you need to be able to just put the thing on and start.
It's missing this thing that just makes everybody go, I want that. I want to do that now. I don't know what it is.
Maybe it's too big. Maybe it feels like a thing. You need a big PC. You need this and that.
I think for me, it's literally just the physical aspect. Yep. For me, it's just there's something worrying or uncomfortable about having like a screen like 2 inches from your eye.
Sure, but I would say for my posture and for my wrists, it's way better because whenever I was drawing, I had like the posture of a shrimp. I would move forward and draw like this, and you all crisped up, and your wrists are fucked. And but with VR, I put my headset on, I lean back like this in my chair, and it's very comfortable.
That's a good point. Yeah. So it's a good. You think that? Yeah, I guess maybe with time. Maybe the eye strain thing won't be an issue, and then it'll just be just a pure gain. Because I think that's what people are thinking. At least me, it's like I feel it like a loss, but maybe it's an overall gain.
Yeah, but it's still a new technology too. They still need to develop it, and for them to develop it, they need to make money out of it. And I don't think they made a ton of money. It's like VR games; they're okay, but they don't make as much money as like not real games, but like. PC games or console games. So there's not a ton of money going into that ecosystem, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good transition. Maybe we can talk about maybe the gaming side of it. Like,
I just had one quick question before we transition.
Okay.
Is that okay, Sean?
That's fine.
Okay,
I'll just shut up.
Thank you. Yeah, please. I was just going to say, so you're kind of saying you lean back in your posture. Yep. What I got from that is that we can eliminate desks. We could just wake up in bed, put the helmet on, and just like start going.
Yeah, we can destroy all the desks. Eliminate them.
You just wake up in the morning, just start working? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, you still need your PC, so you still need a desk to put your PC on.
Replace the nightstand, you just put the PC there.
But you're right, because sometimes whenever I feel I need a change of space, I will go onto my couch and I will work wirelessly, just like not asleep, but like lying down on my couch, just sculpting in the air.
That's great. So the future of like you'll go to a studio, you'll be like at any like I don't know Warner, Ubisoft, whatever, and all you'll see is instead of desks, it's just couches of people lying
plugged
down.
in,
Just people looking like they're like relaxed. It's like kindergarten. Everyone's just like nap time. Everyone's just like lying down.
It'll be like ergonomic couches and everything.
Yeah.
The most comfortable feels when you're sitting down, because if you're lying, your arms, you need to hold your arms up in the air, and that's a lot of pressure on your arms.
Yep,
that's true.
That's fair.
I picture just like, you know how like there's cubicles at offices, and it's just like a dystopian repetition of cubicles. I picture just entering just like layers and layers of couches with people just looking at the ceiling.
But it's even better with the headset because you're cut off from everything else that exists. So you just need space around you to not knock anything. But you don't need any walls because you're just cut off. Nothing exists apart from like your brain.
So since people don't know people are next to them, we can shrink office space.
Exactly, you can save
amazing.
We've just solved all.
So we're all sardines
problems.
now.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
You can cut costs with office space, cut costs with desks and chairs. All you need is a sofa. We've just solved all the problems. Yeah,
that's a good one.
This is good. Yeah. I like that. Okay, now you can ask your question.
Okay, so I'm allowed to speak now?
Yeah, I'll give you permission.
Amazing. I can't wait. No, it's just like a general like, well, is there any big questions left around the art side of VR that you want to ask? Or do you want to transition more to like general things about Andre?
I'm trying to think. Do I have any other big... I think we covered a lot. Like,
it's a lot.
Yeah, we were pretty extensive. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, like general VR, before we move on to the next part?
If at any point you have more questions, just
throw them out.
We'll just throw
them out. And then even for the people watching, like if you try VR and then you have fun with it and you have some questions, just reach out to me online and I'm happy to answer questions.
Awesome.
Nice. Thank you. That's really nice of you, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
And ask comments below, like in the comments, you can also talk about VR if you've experienced it as well. We'd like to know. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was just curious more about the gaming aspect, like what kind of games, and actually it relates to what we talked about with VR kind of being like this hype thing that never really took off as much as it could. Maybe we can talk about those two things. Like,
I have a clearer answer for that. Like, the motion sickness is a huge component of why VR games aren't bigger. Because whenever you're sculpting, you're stationary and you move stuff around you. As soon as your character or yourself are moving in the VR space, you get motion sick instantly because your body is disconnected from what you're seeing. So like your brain sees that you're moving, but your body doesn't feel like it's moving. That's where you get motion sick, and that's where games are not failing, but the tech is just the tech in the body is disconnected, right?
Yeah. It's like a really big trigger for the body to just be like, oh, this is really bad.
Yeah. So what they do to get around that is they do teleporting. So like you will point on the floor and be like, I want to go there. And then you teleport instantly. So there's not that movement of you going there.
Yeah.
The more you try to get over it, the more accustomed your body will get. But it's not something that can just pick up and do. Like, I get very motion sick whenever I play games or stuff like that. So the games that I play in VR are something where I'm stationary and I can teleport around. Like, there's some cool gun games, like, you know, arcade games.
Yeah.
Robo Recall is fantastic.
Yes, I love that one.
That was very
so
good. And what I really like to play is mini golf.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, I have a group of friends that we play VR mini golf together, and we're all over the world, and then we see each other like once every other week, and then it feels very natural because you're standing still, and then you just moving around, and it feels.
I would have never.
It was very natural.
That's not usually I would expect. Oh, like a sword fighting game or like
there's some sword fighting games too.
Or whatever.
Sword and sorcery.
But those are like. They feel very extravagant. The mini golf, it feels so real because you understand like what the thing is. Like another thing that's really cool. Whenever I was young, I used to do graffiti a lot, and VR graffiti is very close to the real thing.
Wow!
Because the way you project, the way you like write on stuff, it feels very analog to the real thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's
I
cool.
also saw this cool. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say I also saw this really cool game, and I think VR is like, if you try to just do what games are right now, it's like, I think it's gonna fail. I think there's like a sweet spot of what VR can offer that regular games on PS5, PC can't offer. One of them that's really cool, I think, is kind of like showcases that is that earthbending game. I forget what it's called. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
But it's like really popular, and the skill ceiling is ridiculously high. Like people play this really competitively, and it's like you can learn, like, I think it's like hundreds of different combinations of motions and stuff, and you're stacking the rocks to have different durability and create momentum to launch. And so then the other person has to block it with rocks that either cancel out with the same momentum or like higher durability, like stacking. It's really interesting, and they're like launching stuff at each other. They can do fast discs that curve around like a wall. It's really interesting, and it's like you can't really get that because you're limited with all the buttons on a controller, but you're not really limited with like the motions, because you can do, and that's the thing, you actually have to practice specific motions like earthbending and Avatar, because if you're slightly off, then the ability doesn't proc. And it's really interesting. It's like, okay, I can see that like really evolving and getting very nuanced, and it's like, that's really interesting. Like you can't get that experience in
There's a ton
game.
of challenges that VR games have to get around. For like the sword fighting games, it's very fun, but like you have no weight on your controller, so you can just swing your sword around really fast. There's some games that play with that, and you have to move at a certain speed to be able to do that. But like the rhythm games are super fun. The boxing games are very fun because you have your headset and then you're moving around, and then when you get hit, it feels like you're getting hit. Your vision gets blurry. You have ringing in your ears. Like it's really
cool. So you can like dodge and like weave and stuff like that.
Your head is moving.
That's really cool.
So for training, that's super fun. Rhythm games are great.
Shooting can be pretty fun. I find it's hit or miss on the game. But you can get those like tactical ones, and you're actually aiming, and then there's like a barricade, and you're just like, there's no crouch button, so you're actually there.
You have to crouch,
and you're like trying to like lift your. So I keep moving away from the mic, trying to animate myself. So you kind of have to crouch and really like position yourself as you would behind this block. So it's like really funny, and then you see people around you that are lying down, and it's like that person is lying down in their living room right now doing like crawling.
Whenever I play mini golf with my friends, you can see the person's body language very clearly. Like probably even so in VR chat. I haven't really dabbled in VR chat, but like you can see people's body language. Like if they miss a shot, they're like have their head down and like shaking.
They actually like emote. They're like, oh.
Yeah, but it's you see the person emoting physically, and it's very like you feel like you're playing with somebody.
Can you like intimidate people on the golf course?
But in any game, like the feeling of personal space is very real. So you can get super close to somebody, like be right in their face, and it feels so awkward and like.
This is why I'll never play a horror game in VR.
That's another thing. Horror games in VR are terrifying.
It is. Yeah. I don't think it's good for your health. Because like I was watching a friend play, and they come to your face. And I don't know about you, but like it really, really scares me. It's too much.
They did Resident Evil Biohazard in 3D, and there's like a scene where you're like right at the beginning of the game, you're playing as Ethan. I love Resident Evil, but you're going in and you're looking for this girl called Mia. And like you kind of see her, and she goes across like, and the house is like really dark and disgusting. And there's one point where you're walking, and she like pops out the door with a chainsaw, and you like block it with your hand in game, and she cuts it off with the chainsaw. But it's like your brain doesn't know that that's not your hand for like half a second, and you're just like, oh my god, my hand, and you like freak out. And I saw the reactions people were having online, like they were like losing it for a second, because really there's like.
It's so hard to explain. You have to try it. It's like you see a ton of these clips where people are like walking into a small plank on top of like a building in VR, and then they feel like they fall over and they panic. Like it feels very real. So like horror games in VR they are fucking scary.
Yeah,
it's terrifying.
They should make you sign a waiver or something.
Like your heart will explode.
I am okay if I get hospitalized or something.
I'm stressed at these games being like away from my screen. Like I don't need to be in the screen like losing it.
But if you're a horror fan, man, you can have a blast with
I think
those.
you can, if you want to be as scared as possible, it's definitely the way to do it.
Yeah. It's and that will only get better if people kind of keep kind of pursuing that. So there's like a lot of cool stuff. I played a mech game in VR, and I think that has a lot of potential. There isn't really a lot of it at this moment, but there's one where it's like you basically it's the one where you're like punching. I don't know if you saw it. It's like you basically go in these underground tournaments and you have to like mash robots, and like it's like a roguelike.
Play that one.
So it's really interesting because you move with your joystick. So instead of having to like click at the ground and walk, you move with your arms. So you're like going like this, like a gorilla, and you're like running on the ground with your arms, and then you push yourself back like this, or you go like this, like you're rotating your hands to turn around. So you're trying to like lunge yourself forward and then punch and then push back to dodge, and then you're like going like this to the side and it's really cool because it's like they found a solution to the movement. Instead of being like, oh, I can't move my legs, okay, let's make this really small body compartment with these big arms that like run like a gorilla.
Like you have no legs. Like that's what it's like to have no legs, I guess. And like you're just running like that in the mech suit, and it's like I was like, this is sick. Like I feel like I'm in this suit doing all these things, and like you can grab them and like crush them, and like it's really cool. And I'm like, wow, I'd love to be like in a fighter jet, or like I think they're doing it for Star Citizen with VR support where you can fly in your ships and stuff. It's like that's so
There's
sick.
some super cool solutions to like game design. Like, there's another mech game, it's called Vox Machina, something like that. And you're in a mech cockpit, but the way you move is you have your controllers and you're physically in the cockpit and you grab the controls in the mech. Right?
That's cool.
So like if you want to talk to somebody, it's not just voice chat. There's a radio that you need to grab and bring to your face to talk and put it back. Great. And you have like the physical joysticks in the mech, and you hold them and you move them around. And if you want to shoot like a missile, whatever, you need to press a button like this.
That's
or like
so cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love like the extra layer of not realism, but you know how Helldivers made you do extra stuff that wasn't it's not as smooth an experience as the older games. I love when they make it just different in that sense. It's really, really cool.
I actually learned how to drive in VR. Like
interesting.
I was
like, to get your license?
Yeah.
Oh shoot.
So whenever I did
like a wheel setup.
Yeah, the whole thing. Like I was not scared, but I was anxious to drive on the road. So what I did is I bought a wheel and a stand and a stick shift, and I was like, it's gonna work the same way. I just put my headset on, and I was really. It got me very comfortable on the road because I could just practice, and if I crashed, who cares, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And with the pedals, the
person you're crashing into cares.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But like, no, it meant in VR.
NPC, so it's all good.
You can have a track with, traffic or no traffic. And I downloaded a game with like a map of like Tokyo, and you can download the mods for like rain, and then you put lo-fi, and then you just drive around Tokyo, and it's super chill, and it feels very nice.
Sounds really fun.
Yeah.
I should probably do
Super
that late at
relaxing.
night to relax or something.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And then whenever I got into a real car, I'm like, fuck, this is easy, man. Like I'm not driving 160 on the highway. Like it's chill.
Usually
traffic lights.
That is a bit stressful. Yeah, that opens the doors to, I don't know much about it, but I'm sure there's probably people doing VR for like therapy and stuff like that, especially when it comes to like what you're saying, like if you're not comfortable with something, I'm sure there's some clinics out there probably doing like light exposure therapy.
Arachnophobia, maybe?
Yeah, you just, you look
at, I do not want to look at spiders in VR.
Like your first level is just Spider-Man, just like shaking hands with Spider-Man. And then level 10 might be like, you like look at a spider like
far away,
from 5 feet
okay,
in VR.
Like, and then the last level is like crawling on your face. You're like, this is great. I love this.
You're slow dancing with like a huge tarantula. And then you get like a certificate.
Like for real, whenever we're playing this golf game, there's a map that's like horror team, and there's spiders, and there's a setting for arachnophobia that will turn off the spiders.
This is a game I played that has settings for arachnophobia. There's actually two, and one of them is really funny, but Satisfactory is this like kind of base building game. It's really fun. And they had a setting for arachnophobia, and it was hilarious because it was just these cat JPEGs, like a face of a cat. And so the spiders would be on the ceiling, but I don't see that. So all I see is this face of a cat going down on a string going, meow, meow, and then it just jiggles at you. And I was kind of like, am I kind of scared of this more than the spider? This is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then somebody else made a mod for Skyrim, and they replaced all the spiders with bears. But because they had no animation, it was just a T-pose bear that would
floating
glide down and then like kind of come to you like really fast. And I was like, I'm very scared of the bear right now. This is terrifying.
Yeah.
That's not better than like having a bear with fucking crazy spider animation.
Bear with 8 legs would probably be the solution.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Just a little in between, you know, so you can integrate the bear a little better.
It's a good D&D monster, like a bear spider. That'd be pretty cool.
Spider bear.
That's why I can't do the Hobbit or like
yeah.
the Harry Potter movie as a kid. Scared the shit out of me with that like it like cuts like the giant. I was like I couldn't.
I think there's this no. I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, it's like the most evil thing you can do to someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gets better. I can see spiders in anime. That's fine. But
At least.
Yeah. But yeah.
What a shame that would be.
But yeah, I guess you could use it. You could use it for therapy to just like practice yourself to like not be afraid of something or like to deal with stuff that would hurt you, I guess.
Yeah, because a lot of the time it's really like that slow build of feeling safe, and I think VR, you can like whoever's programming the engine or whatever can help whatever people have in terms of their fears, stuff like that. I'm sure people are doing it out there.
Yeah, there's applications like outside of gaming and sculpting. Like there's some museum that will use VR to be able to like walk around in the pyramids and stuff like that. Just place you in a space that doesn't exist, right? Yeah. Just to be able to explore anatomy for medical purpose. You can hold a heart and like turn it around and then see the function of like the skull, and
it's like Operation, but like VR.
Yeah.
You can also visit houses. I think realtors use it for like house visiting and stuff like that. You can see some house options or like some floor plans if they're building like a new construction for condos and stuff like that. So it's not ready yet. They have a 3D mock-up that you can walk through in VR.
That's amazing.
So there's a lot of cool like applications for it.
Yeah. But sculpting is the best one. Yeah.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
Surgeon Simulator is a close second.
Surgeon Simulator, yeah.
You play that with a few people. It's pretty fun.
There's one
Surgeon Simulator?
Yeah, it's like you have to do...
Please tell me what is this?
It's like this kind of comedy game, so there'll be like a body and it'll be like, okay, you need to
remove the spleen.
Yeah, remove the spleen or something. But like it gets kind of janky because it's almost like a puzzle. The spleen is like hidden somewhere and you need to like
there's a bunch of tools and it's like break the ribs and then you have to put it back together and then stuff is not
But people are like accidentally like dropping tools
they are.
And like the patient's bleeding out, so then somebody's like this and you have to put like and it's just and you see their blood going down and it's like in about like 30 seconds he's gonna die if you don't like finish, and it's just hectic. It's very cartoony. It's not like doesn't look realistic, but it's very funny because it all just goes to shit in the end.
It reminds me of like playing Overcooked with someone for the first time. Yeah, like things are burning and one person's hating it and the other person's just laughing their ass off.
They need Overcooked in VR. That would be fantastic.
Cooking,
you're rushing.
I want an anime cooking.
There's
VR.
some cooking games in VR.
Is there good ones?
Yeah, well, but most of the games in VR they're not fantastic. Like it's mostly indie games. Then there's not a lot of like AAA stuff. So it's a bit gimmicky. It is fun. There's some really good ideas, but there's not like the level of polish that you would have for like any AAA game.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, I have. Let's pivot a bit.
Okay.
So I think it could be cool. We talked about VR. We talked about more the gaming side. Maybe we could talk about like other things about you that you're interested in general. Like let's say you have your day at work. What are other things that inspire your work or things that you just generally like?
I enjoy cooking a lot. I enjoy eating.
Yeah.
I mean, something I grew up with was like love for food. Maybe it doesn't.
Me too.
I'm pretty skinny, but I love cooking. That's my escape after work. I love to go out, buy ingredients, and then start cooking something nice.
Nice.
What else?
Oh no, we can. I mean, for cooking, do you like? How did you learn? How did you start learning that?
My dad's a really good chef. He's gonna take his retire. He's gonna retire very soon, but he used to be a chef. He used to be a teacher at a cooking school, and that's how I learn how to cook. I practice a lot by myself, but like he gave me pretty good
That's awesome.
basis. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was also a cook for a few years, I think, and I didn't learn from him though. I kind of regret it.
Yeah.
I just ate the food, and so now I don't want to say a heightened palate, but I'm a bit pickier than usual because you're like 10 years old and you're getting like pretty decent food.
Well, keep that in mind. You have a heightened palate.
Please don't tell me that. I feel like such a snob.
I made this pasta for you, Sean. I hope it's to your heightened taste.
Yeah. It's like Food Wars. I have the God tongue.
Yeah, but
I'm gonna cut that out. I'm gonna bleep that.
but it's something you can practice and develop, like the same way like whenever you draw, you have your like visual library and stuff like that. The food is the same way. It's like something you can practice and get better at and understand flavors, understand how things like match together. Like it's a super, for me it's fun because I don't take it too seriously. Like it's not my job.
Yeah.
If I were to work in a restaurant, I think I'd approach it very differently, but it's still like a hobby. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and you also it's kind of cool. I did some cooking as well, like 2 years ago, and I noticed there are a lot of fundamentals that kind of are similar.
Yeah.
With cooking.
There's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
Even in the like video game industry and the restaurant industry, there's a lot of parallels that you can kind of find.
Yeah.
And so I guess kind of to keep on the topic of talking about Andre as a whole, you talked a bit about kind of like the stuff you like to do, but what are the influences that kind of like created this kind of version of you that loves to do mechs, loves to do all these things? Like, where did that come from?
I guess like the earliest thing I can remember is watching Power Rangers.
Okay.
Like as a kid, I remember just sitting on the floor and then watching it at like 6 a.m. Just these crazy Japanese mechs just all clicking together and like assembling into a bigger thing. Now, I think that was my first exposure to mech stuff. I got really young. Let me do that again. I got into video games very young, and that was a huge part of like how I grew up and like my identity and what I liked. Like as early as I can remember, I was playing video games. My dad had a NES. That was my like first console, and then from that, I got a N64. I think the N64 came out when I was 5 years old, something like that, and that just blew my mind. Again, like the same shift that you had from like 2D side scroller Mario to Mario is now in 3D turning around.
Yeah,
it was mind blowing to me, and like Zelda, all that stuff, I loved it. So like video games, and then I got into PC games around, I don't know, 8 or 9, playing like StarCraft, stuff like that.
There's one particular game you play a lot, I think, right?
Right now?
In general.
Which is?
You know it.
Destiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that game. Like it's beautifully designed. I've played that game for, I don't know, 10 years now. I'm getting a bit tired of it, but it's just because I have 5,000 hours on it, something like that.
Damn.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed that world. Like it just feels beautiful. Everything's so well like designed visually. It's like the best stuff. But I love what Bungie did. Even with Halo, I played a ton of Halo.
Yeah, Halo's a classic.
Yeah.
Forever it lives in our hearts.
Yeah. Halo 3, man.
Yeah.
I was a Reach fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like Reach. I like the kind of updates they did to it.
Same. It was good.
Yeah.
It wasn't as time consuming as Halo 3. Halo 3 was like literally every weekend go to your friend's house.
Like, what was that map that people loved? There was like the invisibility in the middle, and then people would do like the special hop to like hide in the nook in like the roots.
Is it the
and
pit?
Like the pit, yeah.
The pit was my favorite.
It was like a special charm. You do to hide in like the roots of the tree, and people would like snipe.
There's no cheese on this one. I think I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah,
I don't remember
it was
the name.
crazy. Like people were nuts on Halo 3.
My favorite, I don't remember the name of the map, but they had like 2 jump pads at both ends, like a big bridge, and there was like a big jump pad on either side, and you would just jump off. And like, yeah. So video games are huge, like part of my life, and that's what got me into concept art. Whenever I learned, oh, you can do that as a job, and you can make a living just drawing stuff for games, let me quit everything I'm doing and just doing that 100% from now on. Just blew my mind.
It's crazy. When I found that out, it was like, I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
It was like, I need to make this happen.
Why did nobody tell me that was a thing?
Yeah. It was always just like, oh, maybe you can be a graphic designer. I'm like, nah, I got to draw armored guys or something.
And you don't need a diploma, and you can just do that because you're good.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the best at that. You know,
it was like, it felt like an
Obsessed.
old school game where like there was no guides on how to finish the quest.
Yeah.
It was like a very, nowadays it's like, they hold your hand with quests. It's like, here's how to do this. But back in the day, it was just like concept art, and you look up and there's barely anything. And then maybe you might get a chance at finding out if you like talk to someone in the industry. It felt very epic of a journey back then.
Yeah, no, I love that. And also, I'm self-taught. Like, I learned everything online. I didn't go to a school, but it was hugely beneficial for me to be able to find the best teacher out there online and study from that guy. Like, to learn like perspective and stuff like that, I would look up every Scott Robertson video. I could find like any info, and I would just try and absorb all of it. Like, if you go to school, like, not to shit on any school, but you're limited to the talent of your teacher, right?
Yeah.
But if you do all that stuff online, you can find the best teachers in the world and learn directly from them. Maybe you don't have that same relation, but you're able to get their content and then digest the information.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
We
a
had
really
a
good
talk
point.
about this on a previous episode, which is, basically the benefits and drawbacks of self-taught versus a course. And I kind of went down your path too. Like, I didn't want to just trust blindly a course. I at least wanted that full view of, okay, who is the best at this, and then really go for that, just so I had all the options on the table.
Also, I would question the way things are made, like for school all the time. Like, who are you to tell me how to make something, right? And maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm doing VR, because nobody else is doing, is because I like figuring out my own solutions. I like coming out with my own approach and my own like answer to a problem, right?
That's interesting, because some people might see that as, maybe being rebellious, but there's a positive aspect of that, which is you're always being very, not skeptical, but you're not putting blind faith in a process all the time. What is there anything more you can say about developing that in a healthy way?
I think just growing up playing games, your brain is hardwired to solve problems. Like, that's all you do. There's a quest, you need to figure out the puzzle to get the boss to, like, so it's problem solving all the time. So like, I think that's kind of ingrained in my brain to be able to find a solution to something. So like, whenever I was learning concept art, it was like, how do I get as good as possible, as fast as possible? It's like, oh, well, you find a better teacher, like you find the good tools, you find the right way to approach stuff and not just be mindlessly drawing, you know? You need to be efficient with all that stuff.
Yeah.
So where's that fine line? Because I think that's a good point, because sometimes I find students might mistake that, like, this whole, like, who are you to tell me, like, how to approach something? And there's a fine line. There's a fine line between saying something like that and then somebody going like, who are you to tell me that my anatomy is wrong? When the anatomy is wrong. So it's like, so what do you want to kind of extrapolate that part and what you kind of mean by like approaching with that mindset?
Yeah, like, when is it good to be like, oh, I trust you completely, and then just doing what the teacher says? And when is it appropriate to be like, interesting, but, and then you can...
It's good to listen to your teacher if you're trying to emulate what your teacher is doing. So like, if he's trying to show you his way of doing something and to get to that result, that's when you need to listen to somebody. Whenever they're giving you a goal but no like direction on how to do it, this is kind of where you need to figure out your own way to do it. And like, for example, if nobody told me about VR, or they'd be like, you need to work and do 3D for the rest of your life, I would never have looked into it and then try to develop my own thing, right? And doing that, it unlocked something, and it opened up other avenues that weren't there before, right? It's like a solution that nobody brought me. And even for learning like concept art, nobody told me I could just stay at home and watch videos, right? It's something that I found out by myself, and I was like, okay, that makes so much sense. I can find the best education out there, you know.
What was the is there any, so I just want to see how you made those choices. Like, is there any reasons deep down that made you try to explore and be
very specific reason? I was in school, I was studying programming, and I would go to my class, and like, no offense to any of my teachers there, but we would spend the whole class 3 hours watching a guy explain a PowerPoint like in the dark. And I was like, okay, this is a waste of my time. I'm gonna skip the class. I'm gonna stay at home, watch a 10-minute video from an Indian guy on YouTube, and I'm just gonna go to the exam and do the exam. And I passed with flying colors. So I was like, why do I need to spend my time in school when the teacher is just there to like get a salary and like explain something? Like, I'm not talking shit about every teacher, because some teachers are great and they motivate you, but I had a lot of teachers that were very demotivating, and that was one of the reasons why I was like, I'm gonna skip your class, stay home, do the work, and pass the class well, you
know. So it's I guess there's a sort of, you have to pick out when the teaching is very powerful, and then identify where maybe this isn't what I want. So you have to be very scrutinizing in that aspect. Like, be very mindful of what the end goal is.
See?
Analytical.
Exactly.
Yeah. So starting out the word.
Like, find what's good and what's not, and like decide for yourself if it's working for you. Because everybody's different. Everybody can learn differently. Some people learn better with a teacher, with that somebody that explains. Some people work better like self-taught. But the way schools in Canada are structured, everybody learns the same way, the same thing.
Yeah.
And for me, that didn't work out.
I'm gonna get some water, but I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Let's say you're like, I want to help someone get as good as possible and get a job in concept art, or improve your skills as much as possible. What would be like your general advice?
VR.
Just do it. No. I mean, to be able to succeed in that industry and be very good in concept art, you kind of have to be obsessed with stuff. You kind of have to be obsessed with learning, and not in a way that's unhealthy, but like almost addicted to learning and to becoming better and to getting better skills and learning about stuff. Like, most people that I see in the industry have the same personality and the same kind of trait of like, I want to learn everything about this thing, right? And it's to be curious, to be trying to understand things, and it's more a mentality rather than a trick of like, oh, here's are the steps to be better. It's kind of how
the way of being.
Yeah.
It's difficult to. Can that be taught?
You can fake it. You can make yourself believe that that's the way you are, you know. But yeah, to be able to spend, let's say, 10,000 hours to get good at something like at drawing, it's not for everybody. Some people are going to be obsessed, or they're going to do it no matter what, and usually those are the people that succeed.
Yeah. They have like strong, powerful reasons to put the extra effort usually.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a difference between the person who kind of does the work, which is fine. But then there's people who are like, no, I want to put all my like all the eggs in this basket. Like, it means that much to me. I really want to go the extra mile. And I find those people usually do really, really well.
And if you're somebody that's kind of, I don't know if I'm gonna do this as a job or whatever, you're still competing with those people that just don't sleep and watch tutorials and practice every day. That's your competition.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be realistic and be like, okay, well, is this a career for me? The competition in concept art is very high, especially now that's international with, studios in China or studios in like all over the world. Everybody's so good.
And the education is really, really, really high quality now. And there's a lot. There's an answer for everything almost.
Yeah.
Maybe not VR, because maybe there's potential, but
there are for sure.
But yeah, there's a ton. Yeah.
We were talking in the same video, we were talking about like the school stuff. We were talking like how much should a student practice? And it's like one of those questions that's really hard to answer, because it's like you could say, oh, try to do 8 hours a day, but like that's like a healthier amount. But realistically, a lot of the people, like you said, like they're just kind of like sleeping and breathing this. It's like, I don't want to say do 12 to 14 hours a day, because that's not necessarily healthy, but just be aware that your competition and other people, there are people out there, a good amount of people out there that are doing that because they love that. For them, it's like, I'm going to play less video games to do this. I'm going to hang out with friends less to do this, because they love it and crave it.
They're going to work 14 hours a day, but to them, it's going to feel like 5.
Yeah. And they enjoy
that's a strong point, actually. It's not that they're like whipping themselves because it's like this do or die situation. It really is. They have so many strong reasons and motivators that mean a lot to them. They're like, I really, really want this. And those people will do so much more than someone who's just like, and they just try.
I've seen it with most of my colleagues. Like I see you're very good, but you still practice and you still put up stuff every,
Yeah, you do an 8-hour day, and then you also do freelance. Like, it's crazy.
I still love what I do. Like, it's for me, I love this, and obviously I'm not perfect. It's not like a completely like, oh, it's just great. There are struggles, but there is an aspect of it. I love this. I love learning, and I have dedicated myself to making the best stuff I can. And I really, that stuff alone has been a huge motivator for me.
Yeah. And even for work, I do concept art, VR modeling for work, but I do it in my own free time because this is what I love doing. Like, I would do it regardless if it was a job or not. But
that's huge.
It is a job, and I can get paid, and I can, do well with this.
Yeah. So you love it, and you're willing to put in the effort for the job. It's like those two things, man. Crazy.
And it's not to say, for anybody listening, it's not to say that it's not doable to get a job in this field doing 8 hours a day of practice, or even doing 4 hours a day. It just means that your journey is going to look different, right? If you're like, I need a job right now in a year or two, the 4 hours a day might not cut it, right? Like, you can do 4 hours a day, but it might look like a 5, 6, 7 year journey where you take your time. Maybe you're a lot younger too. You're like 14, 15 getting into this. That's fine. Like, take your time. You have many years before you get to that point.
And also, like, don't listen to anybody. Like, don't take our advice to like, what's the best way of doing something. Everybody has their own way of learning and how to accomplish it. So if it works, if you do 5 hours, that's great. Yeah. Like, most people can't because it's just it's not enough. But everybody has a different way of learning. Everybody has a different way of like succeeding to something. So don't listen to
make sure you're not like picking one person's advice and that's like the plan for your whole journey. Definitely try different things, like have different viewpoints, and I'm sure one will speak to you more. So definitely open yourself up to a lot of
decision for yourself. Like, take everything with a grain of salt and then judge, oh, this is good advice, this is not good advice, and do your own.
You should always make the decision yourself, because you need to hold yourself accountable. You don't want to do somebody else's advice blindly, because then if it fails, then you just point the finger at that person. You need to be accountable for those life
especially
decisions.
For our job. Like, our job is to find solutions that nobody else has thought about. It's like, how do I solve this visual problem in my own way?
Yeah, that's huge.
It's like our job is to come up with new ideas. So you need to be able to take information and then judge it and then analyze it and figure out, how do I apply this information to things.
So it's a good skill to develop early on at like any kind of aspect when deciding.
It has nothing to do with drawing or fundamentals. It's just a
mentality.
way of...
So, I have one last, I guess, do you have any other questions before we go into more of the visual stuff?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll do it. Okay. So I think this should be a really good question that we can actually ask most of our guests. It just came to me. What do you think makes a really good concept artist?
VR.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, they just have good designs. They have good taste, and they're able to translate that and execute on it. Like they have good ideas and are able to illustrate them properly. And for me, what I like is good design, like stuff that's clicking together, like good looking shapes, you know, stuff that is sharp and looks kind of mean, or like.
So it's almost like really dedicating yourself to finding out what you think the best design is and really trying to push it to that level, whatever you think, because everyone has their different lens or filter on art.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's all like personal taste. But if somebody likes something that much and is able to make something really cool, they're an expert at like making that specific thing. It's going to be good. Like if you see, you know, any of these artists, what they do at their peak, because that's what they like, it's going to be so good because that's their favorite thing, you know? And I think to be a good concept artist, you need to figure out what do you like doing and then do it better than everybody else that's doing it.
Yeah, that's great advice. So it's not just only listening to, oh, what does the market want? Like, what does the industry want only? There's an aspect of being like finding out what you truly like and going down that road and really honoring it, I find.
Can someone find that for you? Let's say you don't want to find out what you like. Can somebody tell you what you like?
Yeah, but it'll cost you like thousands of dollars.
Yeah, you have to plug your brain into
called therapy.
Oh, therapy. Art therapy. Yeah.
There you go. I'm just like, you like to draw mechs. After years of seeing you, I have figured out that you love mech design. Done. It's like, yes.
You cried so many times in my office, but we finally found out.
That's crazy. That'd be crazy. The person hasn't been drawing
Concept
for like
art
years.
Therapy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I guess we can move to the visual stuff. Like we can talk about a bit of your influences, and I think we had some stuff we want to look at. So let's do that. So I guess we can pull up some of your sculpting.
Yeah, sure.
So we're gonna show you guys a quick breakdown of what it's like to be in the first person view of sculpting in VR. So voila.
Yeah, it's sped up too because seeing it in real time is a bit boring.
Yeah, so we'll probably play a bit while we're talking.
It's playing right now. So we'll jump back in anytime. Yeah.
So do you want to kind of like, I mean, we've already talked about your process a little bit, but like we're going to have this snippet playing. Do you want to kind of tell us a bit about it and kind of...
Yeah, for sure. Like the way I sculpt stuff and like the personal stuff I do is heavily inspired by stuff that I like as a kid and I still like. So like figurines, robots, like model kits. I like building things and I really like toys. So whenever I sculpt something, I try to make it look like a toy. And whenever I pose it and like it feels still like like a toy. You're a kid playing with, you know.
Yeah, because I notice like this is I can instantly know it's you when I see your work. There's this aspect of that handheld sort of feeling. And I think it gives like a really nice charm to your work.
Yeah, it's tactile. And also with all the VR sculpt that I'm doing, I embrace all of the artifacts that it's creating. So I'm not trying to get super clean. I leave it messy because it feels banged up. It feels used, right? You don't need to get super clean. You can get sketchy and it feels more tactile, like a real thing, you know?
That's true. Yeah, so maybe we can talk about also some of the influences. We have some images or a couple images sharing like what you were looking at or people you really like. So there's this one. I think it was, what's his name?
Image number 2.
Yeah, image number. Yeah.
Yep. So that guy is called Ismo Juki, and I brought my favorite book right here for the book table.
Sure. Let's share.
And he's a mech designer from Japan. He's fantastic. His shapes are so cool, and he worked on Armored Core, and
the new one,
the old ones.
Okay, nice.
And his designs are just so nice and very mundane, so well executed, and there's something that's cool about there's something so cool about dumb robot, like a robot that his purpose is like to fill up a vending machine, or like or forklift, or like something that carries a container. Like, it's easy to make a robot look cool if it has a bunch of guns, but if it's a robot that's like stupid and it just mows the grass, there's something cool about that. Like,
you connect with it weirdly enough. It's like
it has a job too.
Yeah. It's not just like the typical, mech with a bunch of missiles and everything you've seen a million times. It's like something very mundane, but with a twist.
Yeah, but if you can make like a mech look really good without any guns, and you put guns on it, like, you sold it.
That's actually a good tip.
Yeah,
that's great.
So yeah, I love what this guy is doing. Like, all his shapes and all his stances, specifically for the robots, they feel very like refined and aggressive, and
that's a really cool point. Because a lot of the times, at least when I was learning design, a lot of the attention was on just like the details, like the surface elements, or like if it had a laser gun, and then the nuts and bolts. But what's cool about this is that there's so much finesse and attention put on those subtler aspects, which is like stance and stuff like that. Can you speak to some of the things that are more subtle that people could pay attention to more?
It has personality. Like, it is a machine, but it feels like a character. It feels like it's sentient, right? It's not just some generic thing. And what I like about his stuff, it has a lot of personality, and it feels very alive, even if it's a machine. Has character.
That's great.
That's something that I try to translate into my own work. Like, would it be with banged up edges so that it feels used, or especially the stance. I like when something feels heavy on a surface, because whenever you design in 3D, there's no weight to stuff. Like, it just floats in the air, right? But having something that feels heavy, it feels that it has weight, is something that's super cool to see in an image.
Yeah, because and this is something maybe character artists can understand a bit more, because they have to do this all the time. If something doesn't feel grounded and the weight really feels like it's like, because it's a function, it's literally the function of our body to balance weight and move in a certain way. I feel like if industrial or mechanical designers really bring that into their workflow, you're just adding such a more true to reality feeling in the designs.
If your character is off balance, you can see it right away. You're like, oh, he's gonna fall, or like his ankles are too thin, they're gonna break. You can't support this whole thing, and your eyes are really good at judging that stuff quick. Seeing something that's like, something's off.
100%.
It needs to stand. It needs to have weight, and even like whenever people are drawing or sculpting and they have like skin that feels heavy, like there's folds in the skin, that's super nice to see, like those master sculptors that sculpt cloth, but it feels like it's draping down. Like there's gravity to something that's always beautiful to see.
Amazing. It's good stuff. You have any questions regarding this artist here?
Actually, I wanted to jump on to the next one we have, the next little reference, number 3.
Gundam kits.
Gundams.
Yeah.
So that's something I can relate with, since I have some Gundam kits at home.
They're so much fun to do, and like I got introduced to them pretty young, and I remember vividly how I got introduced to them. I was in a day camp whenever I was young, and we were at an outing in Chinatown, my city, in Montreal, and I had money to buy lunch. Like my parents gave me money to like buy food, and I ended up in this little shop, and I found this box. I was like, what the fuck is this? First time seeing something like that, I picked it up. I was like, this robot is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I used my lunch money to buy this box, and whenever I got home, I opened it, and I was like, oh, you put it together, right? So like Legos were cool, but Legos are like little bricks, right? This was robot parts, and you put it together. Like, as a kid, I was like, holy shit, this is cool. So I got into it. At first, like I wasn't even, clipping it with scissors. I was just ripping it up, mashing it together. But that's how a kid, plays. And he played bang it up.
We forgive you.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people online are like,
yeah. And now I have, my perfect grade.
We're like gloves.
It took me a week to build. I would never play around with it. When I was a kid, I was like, oh shit, this is fucking sick.
And so it's cool how, like, I don't know, for me, I can see it directly in the work you make now.
Yeah.
What is the reason you think you really want to keep those aspects? Like, what really, what kept those aspects in your work today?
I guess it's just what I like doing the most. Like, it's what I liked as a kid, and it's what I like now. Okay. And having all those like mech kits, the way it's put together it has a purpose. Like, it feels very intentional how things click together, how it fits together. So whenever I try to translate that into my work, it adds a sense of believability. And people always ask me, like, how do you get better at mech design? How do you get better? Well, Gundam kits, you physically build the thing, you understand how it's moving, what joints are. Like, you can study joints with pictures, but like having it in your hand and then building it, the best way to learn.
Yeah, I find it so good. It's such a next level thing to think about when you're designing anything mechanical. Is just like the sections of things, breaking it out, being able to understand more about how the pieces were made and stuff like that. It's
how it moves too, because the way you draw a joint, the way you position it, visually, it's gonna tell you how it moves, right? So like a ball joint, just by looking at it, you're like, I get that it's 360, or if you put a joint that's moving this way, like just by looking at it, it makes sense, right? So you have to translate that stuff to your work.
100%.
You can't just put details willy-nilly like this.
Yeah.
And having that understanding of like, when you're kind of mentioning like that understanding of the construction and stuff like that, it also applies like just learning things. Like if you like mech design, you like weapons, anything like, and kind of like you have to build, like understanding how pieces are manufactured as well, like just plays a role. It's like understanding the construction, like just gives a level of believability and like this cool factor to your designs, like seeing how a piece was like machined and stuff. Sorry.
Just like waving at you. Gotta put your mic near your mouth.
Seeing how a piece was like machined and stuff, because like, you'll sometimes like when stuff is like pressed in like a machine, it creates interesting like dents sometimes in like plastics or stuff like that, because and those act as like support, or to like you'll have interesting holes that reduce material waste, and like all the things you don't get from just randomly drawing it. Like you have to look it up. You don't get this understanding of like building unless you kind of do it. You're just kind of going to be guessing or kind of like going along unless you've kind of done it and really see like, oh, okay, I can make this joint move like this when I put it together. This piece slots in like this, and it's like that's all information you're kind of developing in your visual reference library that you can then apply to your designs afterward.
And then all of this stuff you can apply to other anatomy as well. Like you can understand how a basic skeleton of something moves, and then you're like, oh, I can apply that to a dinosaur, right? It's the same bones. The shapes are different, like the proportions are different, but it still moves the same way. Yeah. And then, this dinosaur, it's a crocodile too. Like it's the proportion is different, but it moves the same. Like it works the same way, right? So.
So it makes you understand things that are very consistent across different designs. Yeah, it's awesome.
And then once you learn that stuff, you can break it. And then let's say you design an alien, you're like, okay, I'm on purpose not going to do all these things that make something feel like it's human, or, you attach it to like a squid. It's like a squid doesn't work like a...
So you might use one joint and then omit the other ones. Yeah. There's more options on the table.
You want to make things more grounded. You're going to use a more grounded skeleton. If you want to make things look more alien, you're going to use something that feels the opposite of the grounded one.
That's awesome.
And that kind of links back to that whole thing, like doing the research, doing like things that are not the actual drawing part, that just, again, build up that knowledge and make your designs, like you were talking about, like designs are such an important part. It's just going to make that aspect even stronger.
You have to be curious. Like every time you walk around, you need to look at stuff and like not analyze everything you do, but just be be mindful of like graphic design on a poster, like nature, like be interested in stuff.
Yeah, because graphic design is huge. Like you're gonna design. I mean, I know cars and everything. They have sometimes decals and different patterns that will really enhance the visuals of it. And looking at mundane stuff too, I think it's important not to just bombard your subconscious or your brain with just the cool mech stuff. That's
just
the
sugar.
First thing you would think of. Like look at a toaster, or like, look at a mouse, and then try to make it so you're not just biased with only like I don't want to just the typical stuff. I think it'll make you a much more versatile designer overall.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But there's something really cool about like generic big guns robot. Like,
for sure.
We all love that stuff, and there's a reason why, like, Pacific Rim or like those like candy movies, it's just sugar.
Yeah, just like
100%.
Yeah.
It's something
high glucose
cinema. You need to understand that stuff too, because it's important to be able to inject it. If you just do a toaster, well, it's boring. You need to be able to inject that, like,
of course,
that juice.
I think it's just having more options as a designer. I think what people would
understand why something is boring and understand why something is interesting and be able to like gauge it and like position it on a scale is super important.
And that scale is like so wide. Like you look at something for like, let's say the new Armored Core 6, compare that to like Gundam, compare that to like, I don't know, some of the designs in Destiny, like this like, it's so wide, this like kind of range you could do. Yet they all feel believable in their own way, and they all are kind of like interesting.
They all have
really
that specific flavor that comes outside. They're all robot based, but they all have something extra that's injected. Like Destiny is robots, but injected with fantasy, like medieval magic and stuff like that. And then Armored Core is robots, but like very over the top animation and stuff unfolding and the 1,000 missiles coming out. Like it's very Japanese in the taste, where it's like it's over the top. We'll crank it to the max.
And the surface detail is very industrial, very kind of like gray and like browns and subtle reds. Like it's very much
it's very military, because the mechs in that game are weapons of war. They're not made to entertain. It's like a robot from WALL-E or like
best mech ever.
Yeah.
WALL-E.
Like iRobot, or like something that's made to look like a human. Like Armored Core, they're at war, so it needs to be gritty and like dark. Like you're camouflaging yourself. You're not a cool bright orange robot. You'd fucking spot it from a mile away and be like, it's right there, dude. What do you...
It's pure function. It's like they literally are just, they want to win the war. So every decision is about that. Just winning the war, rather than maybe iRobot, where it's about, the consumer, how they feel about the product and all that kind of stuff. So just different problem solving.
All of this like extra flavor, it's outside of just robots, right? It's outside of just concept. You have to understand these things, how like life functions, and be able to tell, oh, this is a war robot, this is a manufacturing robot, this is an entertaining robot. Friendly, angry.
What kind of time period is it? Is it like more like modern day kind of mechs? Is it something like Scythe that had those like 1920 kind of like harvest kind of looking mechs that are diesel punk? You could look at retro sci-fi stuff like BioShock, stuff like
is it 100 year in the future? Is it 1,000 years in the future?
All these things are going to change the build quality, the kind of joints, how like
everything
complicated they are. Like all these things matter. It can really create different kind of cool stuff.
Definitely.
So that was nerding with mechs and VR.
Yeah, that was a lot. Great. We're at like we're around 2 hours now. That was a lot.
That was a really awesome. So thank you everybody for tuning in. That was a really awesome episode. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this.
Where can people find you?
Again, Mechnuggets everywhere. Just send me a DM and I'll be...
So Instagram, I guess your ArtStation, all that
Instagram,
kind of stuff.
ArtStation. ArtStation is just my name.
And your course too.
Gnomon course, YouTube, Mechnuggets, Twitter.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd want to share with people about anything at all, mechs, maybe some cool mechs people should check out. Anything at all before we let everyone go?
Maybe your favorite build.
My favorite build, the Gundam build.
Yeah.
Why not? Good question. I really like the Shin Musha Gundam. Is like a samurai Gundam.
I know the one you're talking about too.
Yeah, he has big shoulder pads.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
My favorite one, I really like Ashley Wood's figurine.
Oh yeah.
Those are beautiful. The 3A stuff. That's great. Check that out. But
and also your stuff. You got your mechs. So definitely check that out, guys. Check out his mechs. Yeah, they're really awesome.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
That was awesome. That was a good episode.
Till next time.
Till next time. I thought we were done.
We'll just cut it there. That's good.
Okay, good. Perfect.
Yeah.